Lupin the Third Part 2 is my favorite Japanese animated TV series of all time. Produced by TMS Entertainment and based off the Lupin the Third manga created by Monkey Punch, it follows the adventures of Lupin the Third, grandson of Maurice Leblanc's Arsène Lupin, as he travels around the world with his friends Jigen, Goemon, and Fujiko to steal the most prized treasures, while thwarting bad guys and evading Inspector Zenigata, a Japanese policeman of Interpol who's made it his life's mission to capture Lupin and put him behind bars. It's a perfect blend of action and comedy and is the perfect show for international audiences, with its cast of cultured characters, Western and Eastern influences, and vast array of locations the characters visit in each episode. There are many people, including myself, who have been charmed by this wonderful show, but only a fraction of these people, including myself, have actually bothered checking out its predecessor, known nowadays as Lupin the Third Part 1. This series was made back when TMS Entertainment was still called Tokyo Movie and was originally broadcast from October 1971 to March 1972. The show was initially not that successful, but it did become pretty popular through reruns in the 1974 live-action Lupin the Third movie, which inspired a second animated TV series, now known as Lupin the Third Part 2, which premiered in October 1977 to major praise and success and aired on TV until October 1980. Unfortunately for Part 1, its initial minimal success caused it to fade into obscurity, so much so that the original soundtrack masters for the show were lost in the TMS archives. Luckily, the episodes themselves were still preserved by TMS and can be watched for free on Verve and bought on the complete series DVD put out by the badasses at Discotech Media. While some Lupin fans might be put off by the more serious tone of the first few episodes, the majority of Part 1 still had a lot of fun episodes that I absolutely recommend you check out because they're quite entertaining. It's because of the massive underappreciation for this particular series that I've decided to make a top 10 list of my favorites. Now, making this list was pretty easy since the series only has 23 episodes, and there are a fair number of them that I'm willing to skip. That's not to say that most of Part 1 was mediocre or bad, since I enjoyed most of the episodes that I've watched of it. So let's get this thing started, shall we? This is Andrew Ambrose's Top 10 Lupin the Third Part 1 episodes. Number 10, Episode 3. Let's start off this list with its oldest episode. Lupin and Fujiko are out driving a boat when Fujiko takes Lupin's P-38 and shoots a woman driving another boat. Lupin checks to see if the woman is okay, and Fujiko leaves Lupin behind. She introduces herself as Linda when a large battleship attacks the two of them, but thankfully they're saved by Jigen, although Linda disappears before Lupin can introduce her to Jigen. They find out that Linda was the assistant of the world's foremost authority on nuclear fission theory, Dr. Heinlein. The two men decide to visit Dr. Heinlein's lab on a nearby island, but they have to deal with the evil syndicate known as the Killer and Killers on their way there. Lupin finally finds Linda, and Dr. Heinlein explains to Lupin and Jigen about the special flowers that bloom on his island, the Third Sun. The Third Sun has very explosive capabilities, and the Killer and Killers have forced Dr. Heinlein to experiment on it so its power could be harnessed for their missiles. Not only that, but he regretfully did human testing on Linda, turning her into a witch that can't survive without the Third Sun. The Killer and Killers capture Lupin and begin harvesting the Third Sun, but Lupin escapes their prison and helps Dr. Heinlein burn all the Third Sun so the Killer and Killers can't harvest it. Unfortunately, this also means Lupin must witness Linda wither away into nothing as her life slowly burns away with the Third Sun. I love this episode because of its plot and the relationship between Lupin and Linda. Linda especially helps make the story very interesting as we find out the unfortunate fact that her life cannot go on without the Third Sun, and we share Lupin's pain and heartbreak as she dies in the fire at the end of the episode. Truly an episode I'd recommend if you have an itch for a well-done dramatic story. Number 9, Episode 11. A madman is posing as Lupin and blowing up various bridges around town, so Lupin and Jigen decide to investigate. They deactivate one of the bombs set to go off so they can find the bomber. They follow him to his hideout but get captured by him in the process. The man explains that the bombings were a means of luring Lupin to him so Lupin can help him steal money from an armored car. He even threatens to kill a young kidnapped woman named Lisa if Lupin refuses to help out. Lupin wants to do the plan his own way and shows kindness and assurance towards the helpless Lisa. Lupin and Jigen successfully execute their plan and get the money, but the madman double-crosses them by ratting them out to the police and not letting Lisa go free. He tries to escape, but Lupin is able to follow behind his motorboat. This leads to one of my favorite moments in the entire series. While the madman fires upon him with a shotgun, Lupin carefully takes out his P-38 and takes aim. All the sound effects cut to silence until Lupin fires his weapon and takes out the madman in a single shot. Truly a powerful moment that captivates me every time I watch this episode. With the madman dead, Lisa finally goes free and Lupin makes a daring escape while wishing her goodbye. This episode's antagonist is one of the most demented and ruthless people in any Lupin the Third related media that I've seen, which makes it all the more satisfying when Lupin kills him at the end and saves Lisa. Definitely give this episode a shot if you haven't done so already. Number 8, Episode 15. Zenigata is told by his commissioner that he's been invited to attend a world police conference in Europe. However, Zenigata is concerned because Lupin is planning on stealing a gold bust from the Kinman mansion, so he vows to catch Lupin before going to Europe. Lupin and the gang arrive at the mansion and attempt to blow up the walls. However, the walls have anti-explosive plates beneath them, charged with electricity, and they're shielded on the outside by bulletproof glass. The gang barely escapes the cops, and Jigen snaps at Lupin for not properly planning ahead. Zenigata also snaps at his men for not being able to keep up with Lupin and begs his commissioner on the phone to give him one more night to catch Lupin. Lupin tries to survey the area, but it seems hopeless. Luckily, Fujiko suggests that Lupin get himself captured so Zenigata can go to Europe and then steal the bus with Zenigata out of the picture. Lupin likes the idea, and he also brings up a hole that he found outside of the mansion with a path leading right to the mansion's interior. Later on, Lupin goes to the mansion disguised as a drunk so he can get himself locked up, and he puts a small case on the bars of his jail cell before he gets out. The gang finalizes their plan and puts it into action later that night. Jigen distracts the cops disguised as a truck driver while Lupin sneaks into the hole and Fujiko cuts the power. However, Lupin sets off a generator upon removing the bust and the lights come back on, alerting his position. And when he tries coming back through the hole, the end is blocked off by Zenigata and Lupin gets locked up. Zenigata thinks he's finally won and happily sets off for his flight to Europe, but Lupin finds the case he put on the bars earlier and uses the tools inside it to get out. The gang goes to the airport to say goodbye to Zenigata and then steals the bus from the mansion. This is a fun episode to watch because you get to see the team working together and executing their plan, especially with Lupin figuring out how everything will go down. Zenigata's involvement in the story makes for some good times. Definitely recommended. Number 7, Episode 14. This episode involves the wedding reception of the very wealthy Catherine aboard her private yacht. Lupin plans on stealing a special jewel from Catherine, known as the Eye of the Nile, and sneaks aboard the yacht inside of a wedding cake. Fujiko is also after the Eye of the Nile, dressed as Catherine's maid, Margaret. Lupin manages to steal the jewel from Catherine's dress during the wedding ceremony and disguises himself as a count, but it turns out that the jewel on Catherine's dress was swapped out with a fake by Fujiko. She thinks that she's beaten Lupin once again until Catherine's cat Belle comes in and jumps at Fujiko, who drops the jewel she had. It turns out that jewel is also a fake since it easily shatters upon impact. Realizing that they've both been duped by Catherine, Lupin and Fujiko decide to team up and steal the jewel together while watching out for Zenigata, who's on the hunt for Lupin as he always is. They try looking all over the yacht, searching every nook and cranny they can check, but are completely stumped as to where the real Eye of the Nile is. We eventually learn that Catherine knew the entire time that Margaret and the Count were Fujiko and Lupin in disguise, but Lupin is quickly able to figure out that the Eye of the Nile is stored inside Belle's right eye socket and nabs it while the lights are turned off, thus making a perfect getaway with Fujiko. This episode is awesome because it's a rare instance of Fujiko not backstabbing Lupin in the end, which happens quite often in Part 1. Honestly, I always found it a little annoying when Fujiko takes whatever Lupin steals, so it was a pleasant surprise to see this episode be a bit unconventional. Also, this episode gets brownie points from me for having more fun moments with Zenigata, especially since he has some pretty big involvement in this episode's plot. You should definitely see this episode because you will be satisfied when you do. Number 6, Episode 21. This episode centers around Rie, a tomboyish girl staying with her uncle George, not knowing that George is actually keeping her there as a hostage. Rie's father Ken has asked Lupin to save Rie from her underhanded uncle, but Rie fights back at first since she isn't fully up to speed about her uncle. Lupin explains to Jigen that Ken was a partner of Lupin's father, working as a safecracker, and he quit the crime life after Lupin's father passed away, and that George stole Rie from Ken when he refused to help George with a safecracking job. Now, the police and George are both after Lupin and Jigen, so they decide to split up, with Lupin taking Rie to Ken by himself aboard a train. Rie refuses to believe that her uncle is a bad guy despite what Lupin tells her, until George's helicopter catches up with them. Two of his men get on the train and threaten to shoot Rie, who finally starts to realize that Lupin was telling the truth. Speaking of which, Lupin is able to channel his inner Tobey Maguire and disconnect the single boxcar from the train, allowing him and Rie to leave George's goods behind. Zenigata and his men manage to derail the train, but it keeps on going, ramming its way through a forest and getting back on the railroad tracks while taking heavy damage. That's one powerful train! Unfortunately, Lupin and Rie are thrown from the train by some explosives set up by George. Lupin is unconscious for a while, and Rie finds an old picture of her father in Lupin's jacket. After Lupin wakes up, Rie is quickly able to piece together the past of her father, plus the reason why he asked Lupin instead of the police to rescue her. Suddenly, George appears and fires upon Lupin and Rie, but the two manage to evade the bullets, and Lupin builds a giant crossbow that takes down the helicopter, which explodes in a crash landing, though this surprisingly doesn't kill George or anyone else on board. At last, they reach the bridge, and Rie is finally reunited with her father, all thanks to Lupin. This episode has a very good story with great animation and some nice comedy, and it's one of those instances where Lupin gets to play the hero, which director Hayao Miyazaki loved doing whenever working on anything Lupin related. Overall, this is definitely another fine episode that you can't miss. Number 5. Episode 5. This was the episode that debuted Goemon, a badass samurai with the powerful Zantetsuken sword capable of cutting through virtually anything. Many Lupin fans don't know this, but Goemon and Lupin originally started out as enemies in the manga, and that's reflected here in the anime. Goemon was originally ordered by his master Momochi to kill Lupin, but being the cunning son of a bitch he is, Lupin is able to outwit Goemon and only barely escape the blade of the Zantetsuken. Goemon is shown to be in a relationship with Fujiko, and he has some affection for her despite his master's disapproval. Fujiko tells Lupin that Goemon is a demented pervert who tried to rape her, and she tells Lupin to meet with Goemon for a death match. But it turns out it was a trap, as Goemon was told the same thing by Fujiko, and Momochi bombards the two men with explosives. They survive, however, and Goemon tries to kill Momochi, learning that he tried to kill the two men just so that no one could surpass him as the world's greatest assassin. Momochi and Fujiko escape from Goemon in a hot air balloon, but Lupin blows it up with his P-38, killing Momochi. However, Fujiko somehow was able to survive the explosion, and even films Lupin and Goemon duking it out on a major highway and blowing up many vehicles, which is shown on the news. This episode is very epic because of the action scenes between Lupin and Goemon, and it even hints at Lupin and Goemon becoming friends. This, of course, would happen just 2 episodes later in Number 4, Episode 7. Episode 5 may have introduced Goemon in the anime, but Episode 7 was when Goemon became Lupin's friend and joined his gang. In this episode, Lupin plans to steal 3 scrolls containing the secret of creating Goemon's Zantetsuken sword. The scrolls are in possession of a swordsman who lost a fight to Lupin's father many years prior, so Lupin is stealing them back for the honor of his family. However, the swordsman is being aided by Goemon, and Fujiko has assembled her own group of goons to help her steal the scrolls. Goemon kills Fujiko's goons easily, but lets Fujiko go since he doesn't kill women. Lupin is able to outsmart the two of them, confront the swordsman, and get the swordsman to tell him about the confrontation between him and Lupin's father. Goemon overhears this story and stops working for the swordsman. He then decides that the fairest solution would be for Lupin and the swordsman to have a duel with the winner obtaining the scrolls. Despite the swordsman having the power of the Zantetsuken, Lupin is able to use his wit to lure the swordsman into a trap hole and win the duel and the scrolls. At the end, Lupin and Goemon have another duel with each other, but this eventually turns into a laugh-filled chase as the two men quickly become good friends. This episode is awesome in so many ways. It completes the story of Episode 5 in such a satisfying way that it leaves me with a joyous feeling after every time I watch it. Also, this was the first episode of Part 1 to be directed by Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, so the episode also incorporates some more moments of comedy and slapstick, which truly adds to the entertainment value. This is definitely an episode that you can't miss. Number 3, Episode 8. Lupin steals a deck of special playing cards from the very greedy rich man and crime lord Mr. Gold at his birthday party. These very playing cards were previously owned by Napoleon and bring good luck to those who possess them, but only for a certain amount of time. Despite Lupin's success in stealing the cards, Mr. Gold doesn't give up so easily and resorts to fiendish tactics in following Lupin's every move in an attempt to get the cards back. Zenigata is even able to keep up with the gang because Gold keeps tipping off their location to him. This starts to make Lupin and Jigen question the supposed good luck that the cards bring. The gang decides to split and meet up at a mansion. Jigen and Fujiko make it to the mansion before Lupin and Goemon and find a location transmitter in the Ace of Spades. They get trapped like rats by Gold's own Special Institute police, but Lupin knocks out Gold, disguises himself as him, and saves Jigen and Fujiko in an epic manner. This episode's antagonist, Mr. Gold, is truly one irritating bastard. His greed and his fiendish demeanor really make you want to see Lupin and his friends outwit him. Not only that, but poor Jigen takes a real beating in this episode. He has an explosive blown up in his face, he has to hide inside of a coffin for a long period of time, he nearly freezes himself to death inside of a refrigerator truck, and he has to deal with the Gold Institute police at the mansion. With all the wackiness and action it brings, this episode is truly a fun ride and highly recommended from yours truly. Number 2, Episode 17. Lupin, Jigen, and Goemon are invited to a famous nightclub by Fujiko, who wants to make it up to the three of them for her constant betrayals. Goemon, however, refuses the invitation. The nightclub is owned by Fujiko's friend, Rinko Hoshikage, who parties it up with the three friends before strapping time bombs to their wrists and demanding that they pay her a ransom of 3 billion yen before the bombs explode in 24 hours. Lupin and Jigen decide to get the money by sneaking into the Ministry of Economy Printing Bureau's Eastern Factory and printing the money themselves. They use an ad balloon to get over the outer walls and pour a sleeping agent into the air vent to make all the factory workers fall asleep. They overhear some guards arriving to check on the factory, so they have to print the money very quickly. Hijinks ensue as Lupin and Jigen have to float the ad balloon across town with the heavy weight of the large money bags as Zenigata gives chase. They crash into various things before landing and store the bills in an empty shack. Lupin, Jigen, and Fujiko meet with Rinko to have the bombs removed, and they head to the shack to exchange the money, which Lupin cleverly hid inside the wall so the police couldn't find it. But it turns out Fujiko was in on the whole thing with Rinko the entire time, and she thinks she's beaten Lupin once again. Yet, Lupin gets the upper hand because he pranks them with a car bomb, plus the fact that he slightly modified the print at the factory so the money wouldn't be legal tender. I absolutely love this episode because of the wacky misadventure that Lupin and Jigen endure, and the way that Lupin pulls one over on Fujiko after she betrays him in the end is such a satisfying conclusion. You most definitely have to see this episode because it's so freaking good. From the moment I started building this list, I knew this next episode would be my number 1. It's been my absolute favorite ever since I first saw it, and it still brings me immense joy every time I watch it. So prepare yourselves, guys, because it's... Number 1, Episode 19. The 1972 France Fair has come to Tokyo, plus Inspector Ganimard the Third along with it. Ganimard the Third is the grandson of the French Inspector Ganimard, who was an arch-rival of Lupin's grandfather back in the old days, and Ganimard the Third has been assigned to prevent Lupin from stealing all the valuable items at the exhibit, including the old attire of his grandfather. Lupin doesn't take kindly to Ganimard, who mocks his family on TV, and neither does Zenigata, who doesn't want Ganimard getting in the way of achieving his dream of catching Lupin. Ganimard says he'll challenge Lupin using science and logic, but Lupin knows that Ganimard is really just playing a big numbers game, using large amounts of guards and high-tech security measures. After failing to steal the exhibit items at a warehouse and from an armored truck, Lupin decides to best Ganimard at his own numbers game right at the 1972 France Fair. Lupin, Jigen, and Fujiko gather a large group of people and has them disguise themselves as Lupin, which leads to the absolute best moment in all of Part 1, and possibly the entire Lupin franchise, as all the fake Lupins run amok around the fair and psych out the police, Zenigata, and Ganimard. The amazing animation combined with the awesome music makes this scene so much fun, and I can never get enough of it. Having been trolled hard by Lupin, Ganimard admits his fall, and the gang takes off with all the valuables, including Lupin's grandpa's outfit. This episode is just awesome. It has a cool story, the animation is outstanding, and the moment near the end with all the fake Lupins really makes this episode well worth a watch or two. If you could only watch a single episode of Part 1, this is the one that I would recommend, as I consider it the number 1 greatest episode of Lupin the Third, Part 1. Well, there you have it, my top 10 episodes of Lupin the Third, Part 1. I had a pretty fun time making this list, as I got to rewatch some of my favorites from this underrated classic, and I hope you'll enjoy these 10 episodes as much as I do. And as mentioned before, Part 1 can easily be watched for free on Verve and is also available to watch on the complete series DVD from Discotek. And while you're at it, check out Lupin the Third Part 2 and Lupin the Third Part 3 as well. Those two series improve on a lot of things from Part 1 and also contain more episodes, so there's more Lupin action to satisfy. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this fun little video, and I hope to see y'all next time for another wacky adventure. And as always, thank you everybody for watching. I'm Andrew Ambrose, and I'll catch you later.
足元に絡みつく赤い波を蹴ってマシンが叫ぶ狂った朝の光